Record on this computer. Okay, there she goes. All right, Miss Teresa, I'm going to let you go.
Hey, everybody. My name's Teresa Unnerstall, and I have a son, Nick, who's 28 years old, and he also has a dual diagnosis of Down syndrome autism. On top of that, he has verbal apraxia, so the speech component is further delayed, making him technically nonverbal. So when he was similar to Charlotte, when he was probably 4 or 5, started noticing, some further speech delays, but we thought it was the apraxia. And, there were some other sensory things that were going on, very intolerant. That's to put it mildly, to haircuts, some tapping, some stimming, all kinds of verbal humming, autistic-like behavior. So we went to have him tested. And now this is 20, so he's 28. So that was, 20 something years ago. At that time, they did not put him on the spectrum. They said, well, he's too highly social and he makes really good eye contact. And we think it's just the verbal apraxia, maybe some sensory integration disorder issues. So fast forward another, so that was kindergarten. So fast forward to about 5th grade, we realized actually going to a Gigi's Playhouse here in Chicago area, where you would see all the kids play. And when you see side by side your child next to other peers with Down syndrome, there was a big difference. He was off on his own playing, the other kids were interacting. Puberty kind of was starting to hit early, and we started seeing some more maladaptive behaviors that were getting to be a little bit dangerous, quite frankly. So we thought we probably need to revisit an evaluation for autism to see if there's something more. So I will tell you, the evaluation between age 5 and age 11 was night and day. It was so many more layers to the evaluation. And quite frankly, I knew going in there that he had it. So, but I needed to get that official evaluation in order to get more services for him to move forward, to really hone in on that autism piece and support him that way. So now he's, like I said, he's 28. He's aged out of went through obviously high school and in the post-secondary program. And before the pandemic, he was in a really awesome day training program that has since shut down. And so we're making the best of things at home. I have some great respite workers that come in and replicate a lot of what he was doing there. They take him out to the community. He's all about going out to movies and going to, he's all about a meal. So going to the park. So he's living his best life the best way that we can make it at this time. So that's where we're at.
Absolutely. So tell me more about the Down Syndrome and Autism Connection. Did I have the right title? Down Syndrome Autism Connection. Tell us more about that. And this is a national, you live on opposite sides of the country, right? So this is a national group?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it started in 2007. And we provide lots of support and education. So in terms of support, we have, we have 2 different Facebook pages. We have a private support page, and there's over 2,000 members on the page, spanning 10 different countries. So we've got people from all over the world, which is amazing. And we also do a monthly Zoom call the last Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Typically, we'll break for the summer now. So it's typically from September through May. And then, obviously email and phone support, we're available any way you can get us. And we also do a lot of educating. So we go to different Down syndrome conferences and we speak about the dual diagnosis. We're actually going to be at the national conference, the NDSC conference this year. It's going to be in New Orleans, June 23rd to the 26th, I believe. So we'll be there with our board doing a parent panel, actually. So, and Teresa's going to be doing a couple of different presentations there too. And we also have been working really closely with the Down Syndrome Medical Interest Group. since 2018. So it's a group of medical professionals who are just wanting to try to learn a little bit more and do a little bit more research on this, the dual diagnosis. So we kind of have our wings spread out a little bit. So
yeah, absolutely. So when you say support, what would be your day-to-day? So are you getting phone calls of parents who need help with IEPs? Are you getting folks that might maybe have a brand new diagnosis? Like what's your day-to-day look like?
It's pretty much the Facebook page.
Okay.
We get lots of questions, just different scenarios people share. It's a very safe place to share, I will say. It's a closed page. So, just a lot of, kind of that kind of support through there. I do get some phone calls of families who have a new diagnosis, or they're not sure, they just want to chat, or they're looking for maybe some resources, or it can range from all different kinds of things. I just got a recent call from a woman whose daughter was in her 30s looking for day programs. So, so it kind of just, it really just varies.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay, so we have some new friends that have joined us. So I wanted to go ahead and tell you, if you have a specific question, go ahead and put it in the chat for me. That way I can ask it through my little microphone here, because we are recording this. And we can be sure that your question gets answered. So I'm going to go ahead and actually start asking some questions that have been submitted, just so we can dive right in. Okay, this first one is a little bit specific, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. This person is asking about learning strategies that are specific to the dual diagnosis. How do we get all of our therapists, not just OT, and other educators on board with a sensory-based approach? How do we educate them and other providers on the challenges and opportunities for children with a dual diagnosis, while A, not overwhelming them, and B, in such a way that highlights potential and opportunity? So that's the many-fold type of question, but mostly about how do we get everyone on board?
Yeah. I would say if you want a sensory-based approach and you got an outside sensory evaluation, maybe they would be willing to come with you to an IEP meeting to maybe, help kind of advocate why it might be a good thing to do and get on board with the IEP. You might want to get an advocate to help you with that. You do want to make sure, if you do a sensory based approach, you do want to make sure that it is in the IEP, so that you can kind of keep the school accountable for that. I will say, I just want to share that my son had a sensory program when he was little, probably 4 years old. And I went to an outside evaluation, and we got the school on board, and he did the Wolfbarger protocol, the brushing protocol, and a weighted vest, and the music. And so it was quite a lot going on. And I just want to send a word of caution that the OTs at his school at the time were part-time, so they weren't always there to kind of monitor what the teachers were doing. And it ended up being a lot of overload for him. So just something I think to just kind of be aware of if you do, and if you are able to get the school on board with a sensory-based approach, just to kind of, be careful about that. And then I think educating other therapists and other teachers to create a learning profile. It's just like a one-sheet thing. That kind of explains about your child, their strengths, their weaknesses, what might set them off, what they like, what they don't like. And it's just a great way, especially if any new staff come on board, that they can kind of see, they get this nice snapshot of your kid, it might be a good way to help explain what your child's, goes through, I guess, in a day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just add on, because that first question was actually probably 2 or 3 questions. So I kind of divided out in my head. And I think one thing I will say, and this is, a lot of this is research, evidence-based research that I've been collaborating with doctors across the country and presenting with them. So the 3 areas that we're noticing that should be addressed are communication and sensory and behavior. So obviously, when you've got a communication deficit, if they are not able to express themselves, it's going to come out in behavior. I always say every behavior, even the ones that we're not too crazy about, are communicating a need or a struggle. So if you look at it that way, so if you can put those 3 components together and work as an IEP team, you're going to get some good results, some positive results. I would recommend following, if you're on Facebook, the autism discussion page. This guy, Bill Nason, is amazing. He explains a lot of these things, like when you have sensory filtering problems. He just did a post the other day about this. So for instance, a neurotypical person, if you're at the mall and there's crying babies and there's loud this and that, you and I could probably filter it out a little bit better than someone with autism. So when you look at a sensory-based approach, you're looking at what in the school is something that might be prohibiting them from learning better, and what can we do to put in place. So one example would be, do they need a sensory break? Is the room getting too loud? Do they need an icon that says, teach them to ask for that break? So they're taking the power, or asking for headphones. And I must have another thought there, but there's so many ways that you can support students that might have that overload, and just try to keep them on that even keel. So now the second part of that was learning strategies. There's so many. I could do a whole another talk about that, but I am a big proponent of using visuals. If your child is a visual learner, picture schedules. First we're going to do this, then you get this, giving them choices, and just any way that you can figure out ways to give them some control over how they can ask, how they can know what their day's going to look like just by having that visual schedule. The other thing, just rewards, working for highly preferred. Like for Nick, when he was in middle school, we're in the Midwest here, so it's POP, P-O-P, that's like Sprite or Coke. Like I'm down south, everything's Coke, but it was POP. So what is it in the East Coast? Charlotte is probably what? Cola? No, what do you guys say? Soda, yeah.
Yeah, soda.
Always, yeah.
Yeah, everything's Coke.
So, so literally he would do one activity and he put the P, then he'd O and P, and then he got some pop. So by the time he got to high school, it was all the way to Sprite. So his time on task increased because that was something that, that was very motivating. It was a hook for him. So, and then just looking at activities where you can, if it's too much, they may just push that activity away and go, no way, Jose. Well, what you can do is break it down to smaller tasks so that you're setting them up for success, really. And they call it discrete trial training. That's a fancy ABA way of saying breaking it down. So those are just some strategies, to name a few. Like I said, I could go on. So,
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Speaking of ABA, our next question is kind of about ABA. There is a lot of discussion in the autism community about ABA. We've heard a lot of good things, we've heard a lot of bad things, and I just would love to hear both of your thoughts on ABA and the Down syndrome population. And
oh, you want me to start? Well, I'll just start by saying there's no one size fits all with ABA. I mean, some people over the years, especially the autistics that are aging out, and they felt like ABA was abused. Most likely they had the type of ABA where it was long hours every single day, not a break. I get that, but not all ABA has to look like that. It can be tailored to whatever, will help your child, support your child, making goals for them.
Can you
I
describe
certainly,
to us real quick? I'm going to take a couple steps back. We might
okay.
have a couple folks on here who might not even have a dual diagnosis yet, so they might not even know what ABA is. Can Teresa or Charlotte, either one, can you tell us what ABA is?
Yeah. Oh, well, it's that stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis. So basically, you're looking at behaviors and how can you support whatever it is. It could be toilet training. It could be learning skills. I'm blanking out. But basically, in my experience as a consultant and having blogged since 2012 and lived it with Nick, getting a good BCBA, which stands for Board Certified Behavior Analysis, that's a mouthful, on board to do an evaluation. They can go, that's what we had with Nick when he was in 5th grade. They had the school district come in, and she just did several viewings of him in the classroom and made some recommendations, had the staff take data. Okay, why is he flicking things off, or, swiping things, or, throwing things, and try to figure out what the function of that behavior was, and then try to put some supports in place. Maybe the activity was boring to him or didn't mean anything to him. Maybe the room was too loud, and that was his way to say no mas. So that can really be a big support in setting your child up for success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had ABA. Actually, Jacob's school now is ABA based as well. And it's been so great for him because we get it at home. Well, we don't anymore because he aged out, but we were getting it at home and in school. And the ABA, the BCBA at our home would come with us to school and work with the school, and we would cross, skills into the home environment as well. And it's what Teresa said earlier. It's basically just breaking down tasks and slowly getting them to do them independently, whether that's, slowly pulling back on a verbal prompt or a gestural prompt, and just really trying to work on those independent skills. Jacob, I never believed that it would happen, but Jacob now comes home and he opens up his backpack and he takes out his lunchbox and he brings it to the kitchen, and then he gets a snack, and then he gets a bowl, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what? And that's all ABA, and it really can be effective. And like I said, it can really help in cross environments as well. And it's not just, school things, it's independent living skills as well. So it can be really, really, really helpful. I know that it really worked for Jake. And I always have the thought of, anything's worth a try. So it never hurts to try. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Charlotte, to circle back on that one-sheeter you talked about, the one-sheeter is almost like they call them personal profiles. If you go on Canva or just Google it, you'll see them. But there's different ways you can do them, but it's almost like a mini behavior support plan, because you have, what I like, the ones that have like a vision statement, and then what works, like for Nick, what works, praise, visuals, this, that, what doesn't work. And then you could kind of list those things, crying babies. I don't know what it is about crying babies. That sound, I can't filter it out, right? It's almost like a good cheat sheet for anybody that's going to jump in and work with them as well. But they get to know you and what they like, and say, oh, he likes pop, so let's make that a reward. So I'm in fact working on a one-sheeter, so I'll have that for the convention, because I really want to put that in action so people can see what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can even have a section on there like things that you're working on, Yeah. So you can pretty much put anything on there, but it's just such a great tool.
Absolutely. Thank you. Speaking of sensory and there's like so many things going on in my house right now. I'm like, I might need a little sensory break here. My husband's having a piano lesson up there, and okay. I had to mute myself because I was afraid that you were going to hear the piano. Okay, so the next one is just, I think my child has a dual diagnosis and I'm very nervous to get them tested. Do you have any advice?
Get them tested. I think, the bottom line is, and nobody wants that additional diagnosis for sure, but it just opens up to more services at school and at home. It really helps us to better understand our child. And yeah, I think, as much as we don't want to do it, it's only beneficial to them in the end. So I strongly recommend, and if you're going to get them tested, make sure that the evaluator has experience with testing individuals with intellectual disabilities. That's really important to note. So
Yes, I would say check in with your local Down syndrome group or autism group to find someone who is qualified to make that diagnosis, that evaluation. And it really is it's kind of the golden ticket to services, just like Charlotte said, but also not only just services like within the school and in-home support, you can then look into some funding. State waivers are available, SSI. Not necessarily all individuals with Down syndrome qualify for that state waiver, but certainly if you've got higher needs, then there's a better chance that you can get that to get in-home support, respite care. It's a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. So even if you're nervous, and it also opens doors, I can imagine, just for you as a parent, to make this connection. Let's see.
Yeah, and I think it validates your feelings as a parent. Like, okay, I thought I wasn't doing enough. I hear that all the time. It's like,
or
this
something
is a lot more.
Yes, that we hear a lot is, I was feeling so alone. I was in this Down syndrome group and I still felt alone, and then once you get that diagnosis, it's like, okay, now here's another little group of people who really get me, it's that kind of thing. Kathy put in the chat, she highly recommends Edelson and Associates here in Louisville. If you are looking to get a dual diagnosis, which actually just reminds me, if everyone that's here in this call wants to put in the chat if they have a child with a dual diagnosis and how old they are. I wanted to do that at the beginning and I didn't, but if you'd like to pop that in there. Okay, I'm gonna keep on going here. This one breaks my heart a little bit. This one says, how do I get my family on board? I feel so alone. Any tips on family, friends, just finding your people?
I kind of was, kind of thinking about that one. It was kind of broad for me. I was kind of thinking, well, do you mean like accepting your child with DS-ASD or having them help you? I was just a little confused on that question. But I think it's always harder, I think, because we, with our family, we just have higher expectations because they're our family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's harder to give grace, if you will, because, they don't live it either. So it's harder. It's hard for them to understand too. If I can just share a quick story, and I don't know if this will help, but my mom came to visit last summer. She lives in Florida, and we went out to eat and we were finishing up and we we're getting ready to go back out to the car. It was raining and she's trying to push my son along. Come on, Jacob, come on, Jacob, come on. And I just sat back and I knew it was going to happen. And but I wanted her to experience what was going to happen. And he got ticked off and he screamed and she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And, but again, I think in certain situations, maybe, you just have to let them experience some things,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was just I wasn't quite sure kind of what angle that question
Mm-hmm.
was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely hard. It's, my family doesn't get it. They admit they don't get it. And Yeah, so that's just tough.
Yeah, I think you just have to be as transparent as you feel comfortable with. And a lot, still to this day, holidays are kind of hard because we get together. My mother-in-law has dementia. She gets anxiety. Well, Nick picks up on it. I think my father-in-law now understands much better what we go through when we have these get-togethers, because he sees, her struggling and then Nick struggling. So I think it's kind of come full circle. But certainly, if you could be transparent, just share with them information, online, whether it is, share my book. It's got every story you can imagine, from running away to haircuts to Code Brown. Let's leave it at that. It happens.
Yeah.
And that, and I also think probably my biggest tip now would be to just say, you know what, we have to get to that point, just like Charlotte said, and this would be something you'd put on a one sheet. What works for me. I need extra time on my transitions. I need to process that. I know I can't be pushed along. Nick's the same way. And for Nick, I always call this one story the chive incident, where he took grandma's chives that she was making mashed potatoes. Those are Costco size. He was just like, it's raining chives. No, Nick. Oh, that's it. All hell broke loose. That's, so it's like, don't say the word no. There's other ways you can say no. That just sets him off. Just like 3, 2, and now he'll correct himself like 3. So, but it's, that's, just be as transparent as you can, and share stories, share, whatever you can find. And it's not easy. Yeah. Nobody gets it like the parent, that's for sure.
Sure.
And
yeah.
And the immediate family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And this next question actually might kind of be in the same vein as this, because if the person who submitted the question before these were submitted anonymously, but if they meant help, it could be my family doesn't want to help. The next question is, have you had any luck with babysitters or respite help? I need a night out, and I have trouble finding folks who are willing to help, or maybe who they trust to help out. You have any tips on that?
So I actually I found a couple of good people through care.com. So that's an option there. You may it is really hard. You may also try to use folks that have worked with your child before, maybe in other schools or other support staff in the past. Yeah, so I've had good luck with care.com. So yeah, I don't know. Teresa, what about you?
Oh, yeah. Well, we have used teacher's aides, and I always just keep it real separate. Like, in fact, I would say 3 of his respite workers now were his teacher's aide, or were aides for him back in high school, still working with him. And also, if once they hit high school, there's a lot of high schools have the peer buddy program, and that's another possibility. They usually pair them up with somebody anyway, who they just, Nick, you'd go to these dances, he'd have like 2 dates, score Nick. So, and what was the other one I was thinking of? Oh, well, if you're applying for that state waiver and you have an agency that's working with you, a lot of times they can hire staff for you. But I have found that to be not as reliable as just, going with somebody that already knew Nick. So,
those natural supports in your life.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I got another question here in the chat that is actually back. I'm gonna backtrack just a tiny bit. So I've read some things that say ABA. We're going back to ABA. That it takes the person's personality away and makes them more like a robot. Is this true? Is this hearsay? I'm very scared to try it. Is there a way to safely and easily start with ABA and maybe test it out?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the autistics that have aged out, and I will speak to this personally. There was a time where there were these compliance commands, quiet mouth, hands to self, da da da. So I could see where you would feel that way, and I've actually kind of evolved and realized that, what, Nick needs to STEM. I just had this new shirt I just got, and it says respect the STEM, which, and it has on the back the definition of STEMing. It's like, we all have this need to do that, but it's like, let them have that. Let him, and so I would say, if you were to come across a behavior plan that was holding them back and not letting them have that time to, get that, fulfill that need, that would be a red flag. I would just say, watch for the red flags. I don't know. That's.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of and tell me if I'm misspeaking, but because I've read up on some of this as well, I feel like a lot of the things that are coming out in the autism community is, older autistics who had ABA therapy when it first came to be back in the day, and it was very militant, and they weren't allowed to STEM. They weren't allowed to act like themselves. It's like, take all the things that make me away, and that's but that, I feel like, especially with this population, the Down syndrome population, it's less that and more, building those skills. It's what it sounds like from what you've both had with your sons, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, Carly. I think, it has such a bad reputation from the old days, right? And that's so not the case anymore. And I'm such a witness to that with my own son. And I think that too, if you, at any point in time, if you want to have, something, if you want to trial it even at your home, just know that, you have the right to say, no, this isn't working, and you have a right to say, okay, I think we're done, so just know that you have that control as well. So yeah, I mean, you could trial it anyway, even at school, in just little small doses too.
Mm-hmm. And it probably, am I right in saying that it's not going to feel much different than any other therapy that they've already gotten in their lives?
Yeah,
it's not going to feel much different.
No,
it shouldn't. I would hope not.
Yeah, they're going to offer tips and tricks, and just like any other therapist that they have is what I'm guessing it will be like.
Yep. And I think it's too, with what I've experienced with Jacob, it's there's a lot of praising involved too. Like, good job. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's not so you're going to do this and, so there's the whole personality and affect involved in that as well. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of funny that it just has that bad reputation, and I feel bad that it does, because I think that's what shies people away. But don't be afraid of it. I think, like I said before, anything's worth a try, and and you have control, and you have the say. So yeah.
And I think it also helps parents. It gives you a lot more support too. I mean, literally during the pandemic, when we were first all sheltered in place, my husband usually travels 80% of the time. Now he's home, and we started seeing these behaviors with Nick when we'd all, get together. I'm trying to cook dinner. Nick's unloading the dishwasher. We're talking, and he was like, wait a minute, it used to just be me and Mom, and now who's this guy here all the time? And he was getting a little jelly, I think, and he was like throwing stuff. And so I spoke with a behaviorist, and she goes, you think you might be paying attention to him, but you might not be. She goes, so every time he and by the way, that's his strength of his. He knows where things go. So we really play on, that's one of his jobs. I unload the dishwasher. So he picks up a plate, the sound of him picking up the plate, I'm like, good job, Nick, elbow bump. Yeah. And once we started giving him that praise, just like Charlotte said, it diminished, because he realized he was a part of the conversation. So that's, yeah, I'm still learning.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so the next question I have is, my child was diagnosed with anxiety, but I still think it's autism. Is this common? Have you seen that anxiety in our kiddos looks the same?
You want to take that one?
Well, we're not doctors, so
No.
I'm just gonna say, and I don't play one on TV, so
This question might be for someone else on our next podcast if you don't have an answer for that.
I'm going to ask the good doctors I'm going to present with about this question for sure. My recommendation would be to, well, I'm always about behavior logs, and just log, when these incidents are happening, and see if there's a correlation to stress in the environment, or it's that time of day. Just to figure out what might be triggering the anxiety, if it's truly anxiety. Now, I will say, because you have that nonverbal piece often with our kids and the behavior and that communication, there's anxiety is going to be a part of the mix. It's recognizing what that trigger is, or and the precursors are for, like Nick. If he's got like a medical alert bracelet, so if he starts biting his bracelet, I'm like, something's off in the environment here. Or if he starts pinching his cheek, then I know, whoa, we got something's not right. And I've got to make an adjustment to get him back on that even keel. So
did you both, with both of your sons, when you took them for the evaluation, did you get that diagnosis right away? I'm wondering if it's kind of about like, this is my mom gut, should I get another opinion kind of thing, if that's kind of what they're wondering. I feel like maybe the answer would be, yeah, like what you said, to really keep a log and journal, and if you really think that maybe it's a dual diagnosis, then
because I mean, it could be, I'm sure there was I know there was a lot more anxiety, when everybody was having to shelter in place at home, homeschool. That caused a lot. Medical procedures, anything can certainly cause anxiety, regression, that type of thing. So it's hard to tease that out. That's why a physician would be able to do that. But if you had a log to present, to go, this is what I'm seeing, and just making sure you know what the signs and symptoms are for dual diagnosis. I know on our website we've got all that. Yeah.
One of the things that we talk about when we present, we talk about Dr. George Capone. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him. He's the medical director at the Kennedy Krieger Institute in Maryland, and he's done a lot of extensive study on the dual diagnosis. And he talks about, autism has there's three core features, right? There's the communication impairment, there's the social impairment, and then there's the repetitive body movements. And they really look at like how these three things really impact our kids. And so anxiety is more just is stress than really these three things that are more associated with autism. That's really what they should be looking at. And if that's still in your gut and you really feel that, no, I still think something's going on, then you can always get a second opinion, but that's what Dr. Capone usually stresses when looking at the dual diagnosis. And it's hard because there's a lot of overlap involved, right? Like the anxiety. Right. And so it is hard to diagnose, but those are kind of the important things to kind of be paying attention to, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, this is a great question that we just got in the chat here. Are you familiar? It says, I'd be curious to know what the incidence is now. When my son was born, it was about 1 out of 10 kids with Down syndrome that had a dual diagnosis, but it seems to have increased. Do you know the answer to this, Teresa?
It's about 1 in 6, I believe now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean, research, it's 16, I see 16 to 18%. Most of the doctors I've been working with, it's a pretty good range. So yeah, it's, and again, you got better diagnostic tools and awareness. And still to this day, when I do these trainings with the physicians, there's so many physicians out there that still don't, and I hear it from families all the time, they don't recognize it. Well, they're so they're
They
so
look at
highly
me.
social. It's like, well,
Yeah.
it's a different, different fruit there.
Mm-hmm.
You got your apples, you got your oranges, and your kumquats.
Yeah. We still have several adults that still don't have an official dual diagnosis. And I get lots of parents that are like, do you think I should go? And I'm like, yeah, like, go ahead and get the dual diagnosis. You're going to get, more services, and, just a lot of doors will open up if you go ahead and get that. So, okay, we got another one. Okay, this is kind of complex, but I'm going to read the whole thing and then we can unpack it. How do you balance letting your child do what they want to do for most of the time, and, for lack of a better word, forcing them to do something you think they might enjoy? Sometimes it feels like a losing battle. So I guess let me think of an example that we could, like, let's say, well, let's just do a school. We have to go to school, right? But what about, like, after school activities? I think that they will like swim, but they really don't seem to want to go to swim. And then at what point do I just let them not go to swim? You know what I mean? I think that's what this question means. I didn't write it, but I think that's what we're going for. Or a program, let's say programming, or a social activity that they really don't seem to like. Where I know it's a fine line.
Yeah, so I ended up, Jacob's school had an adaptive baseball program. So I was like, yeah, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to get you moving and active. All right, so we show up and he just sits on the ground. That's all he wanted to do, was sit on the ground. But, trying to get him up, trying to get him to bat, and then trying to get him around a base. Oh my goodness. It was, yeah. And so I probably lasted about 3 games. And then I'm like, okay, I don't think he likes this. So again, I think it's just trial and error. We had another program. He loves music. And so there's an adaptive rock band, believe it or not. It's really cool. And, so he sits, because that's what he loves to do. He sits in a chair and he plays the tambourine, and that one worked better for him, Right. So I think it's just kind of trial and error. I know that we talk about the stimming before, and we don't always want our kids stimming. But sometimes they just need that, because that's their time to just kind of regulate themselves. But it is kind of interesting. Like we think they might like something, and then when we get them there, it doesn't quite turn out the way we always plan. But just again, try anything, right? There's so many great, and hopefully where you guys live, hopefully there's some great, different adaptive, dance, music, whatever, art, anything. I guess everything's kind of trial and error for at least for me anyway. That's my experience. So
yeah, absolutely.
Oh yes, I second that, Charlotte. We tried, okay, we're going to try the I Can Ride bike camp, and Nick, he wasn't having it. I mean, they have all these cute girls, and they got that little thing where they can push them on the back, try to get him to pedal. He could have cared less. So that was a fail. He didn't lose his training wheels. We just like, wah. So then another one we tried was the Buddies tennis program. Al and I both played tennis. It was more work, like, for me, Charlotte. But the one that did work was in high school. He loves to swim. So his teacher's like, let's try him in this dive hard scuba program. I'm like, what the? He's not going to wear all that. He won't even wear a hat and gloves when it's 10 degrees outside here in Chicago. Lo and behold, they did it. He was underwater. I don't think he came up for 20 minutes. So that was his jam, so you never know. I was skeptical, but I think mainly just trying to meet the child at their level, and whatever that is, and respect that, and yeah, try new things, but it's okay if it doesn't work. It's sometimes I feel like there's so many dreams we have as parents that we have to give up, especially when you get that secondary diagnosis. Well, I thought he might be able to do this, but maybe not. So I just kind of keep that in mind. Is it your dream or their dream? And then look at what their level, meet them at their level and just make them the best version of that. And if they're happy, and like, I love when Nick goes, happy, I'm like, good for you, That's at the end of the day what we all want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fabulous. Okay, I think I've got another question here in the chat. So I know your boys are a little bit older, but this person is asking if you have any potty training tips or tricks, what worked and didn't work. And I can also share, we actually did a whole session on potty training that I can share with you as well, that we can share that whole recording. But do you have any specific Down syndrome autism tips and tricks, if you can remember back that far?
Wasn't that far. I'm kidding. Well, this is where ABA came in. So I worked with a behaviorist, and we, I would definitely say the signs that they're ready take longer, in my experience. But once I got on board and got the family on board to commit to working on a habit training schedule, then that's when things clicked. And it was a marathon, not a sprint. Really several marathons. Yeah, it was like an Ironman triathlon, but we did it. Mm-hmm. But the habit training did help. Yeah.
Yeah, we're still not there. So Jacob has a tethered spinal cord, so that kind of affects his bladder a bit. But I will say that we take him every 2 hours, and I work transitions around like snack or a meal, where he's easier to transition from a table than he is from the floor. So just trying to, work different strategies out to kind of aid in that transition to get him there. He is waking up more frequently dry in the morning, so that's a good sign. I think we're kind of seeing some progress there. But we're not quite there yet, so that's okay.
Well, it sounds like that some tips and tricks from your behavior team have been helpful in that too. So that might be helpful for this family who's asking.
Yeah. Well, the idea of habit training is that you literally have to, again, we're going back to another log. Let's go out and buy some, spiral notebooks in bulk, shall we? So it was another, and so go in. Okay, he just had a sip to drink. He had some goldfish. Take him to the bathroom every 30 minutes. It was a very long weekend. See how long it took to get from here down to there, and then we just realized, well, it takes about this long after he's had a drink, and then we just made that the habit schedule. So it's all in the book there, but it's shameless plug. But,
buy the book.
It was by far one of my greatest accomplishments I've ever done in my whole life, getting that boy trained.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, we have been here for about an hour. I can't believe it. It's flown by. Does anyone else here have a question that you'd like to ask? You can put it in the chat, but you can also unmute yourself if you'd like to, if anyone has any questions. Charlotte, you brought a PowerPoint and I didn't let you play it.
Oh, that's okay. Play now. We already talked about it all.
Yeah.
Give them the website for.
Yeah, absolutely. I can pull it up.
We can put up the last slide with all our information on there. So
yeah, absolutely. Hey Sarah, how are you? Sarah's saying hi to everybody. Yeah, so there was another question in the chat here that is actually a really good point. Hi, Sarah. So definitely, some parents are just feeling kind of alone and like they need support, and are maybe even having some trouble reaching out. So I know that joining your Facebook group is going to be a huge help, because you can post in there anonymously and get help, from folks. But are there any other things that you suggest? Your site obviously is one place that I'll share. But any other tips for parents who are just feeling sad and maybe very anxious about it all? I'll pull up oops, hold on. Oh, I'm recording. Let me see. I was going to minimize for a moment. Hold on.
I will just say that you're not alone. It is, getting that additional diagnosis was way harder than finding out that Jake was going to be born with